journey into the unknown. Over 50 Grecian men dared to embark on a journey full of danger. Their destination, a remote country on the Black Sea. There, Prince Jason shall capture the Golden Fleece and bring it home. A legend which tells the story of acquiring the sought-after precious metal 3,500 years ago. Today in Georgia, archaeologists discover the oldest gold mine known to man. Analyses reveal the legend of the Argonauts is based on historical facts. Iolcus, 1400 BC. In the Greek port city, on the shores of the Aegean, Jason and his companions prepare for the adventure of their lives. The hero has the largest ship ever seen made for the enterprise, the Argo, named after its builder. The crew is comprised of 55 nobles from across the country. The prospect of fame and a good haul attracts them to take the daring journey over the sea. So that the gods favor their mission, the sailors offer a sacrifice. Jason kills a capital ram with one cut, as the custom requires. In the Herzog August Library in Wolfenbüttel, there is a copy of the legendary story. There are only 5 copies in the world. They date back to the missing manuscript of the Greek poet Apollonius. Scientists have been scrutinizing the myth of the Argonauts for a long time. For the researchers, the text is a fine example of the ancient worldview which Apollonius documented in 300 BC. According to ideas at the time, the Earth was a disk surrounded by a circular river and murderous monsters. To venture to the edge of the Earth was a suicide mission.
Jason would receive an especially dangerous task from his uncle, to be completed safely and unharmed. Consequently, he tries to send him to the edge of the world, and the edge of the world is a dangerous place, and a place that you don't come back from. You could say that he sent him to Mars, symbolically sent him to Mars, so to speak. It is known that nobody comes back from there, but you can picture it in the story. It is known that nobody comes back from there.
Everything begins with an oracle. It is about power in Iolcus. A priest conveys the warning words of the seer. The holy woman knows about the ruler's fate. King Peleus must fear for the throne which he snatched from his brother a long time ago. Jason, the rightful heir, has suddenly appeared to overthrow him. The only consolation, the old man can recognize the stranger, according to the promise. The mother of the gods, Hera, intervenes in the form of an old woman. She asks Jason to help her get a sow across the river. The young Greek loses a shoe whilst doing it. With the supposed misfortune of the prince, the oracle's prophecy shall be fulfilled, because the regent of Iolcus was told to beware of a man with one shoe. When Jason appears before his uncle, the monarch immediately sees who is before him. Determined, Peleus uses a bit of cunning. He promises his nephew the throne if he brings back home the Golden Fleece from the end of the world. A journey with no return, as the old man believes. Apollonius praises Peleus's home city as a prospering metropolis. The port was in a prime strategic position in the middle of Greece and benefited from long-distance trade around the Mediterranean. Today, the legendary place is called Volos. Only recently, archaeologists discovered the ruins of a vast palace. 2 significant palaces, storage rooms, workshops, and tombs are testament to the wealth and power of the former ruler. The complex dates back to 1400 BC. The scientists are gathering pieces of a puzzle, reconstructing the story from their findings. For the excavation leader, there is no doubt. Thousands of ceramic fragments prove that the king held a feast for more than 3,000 people. Therefore, Iolcus belonged to the influential center in the Golden Age, when the Mycenaeans held the political and economic reins of power.
The Mycenaean palace in Dimini is important with respect to an historical basis for the legend of the Argonauts, because Iolcus and the palace of King Peleus is the starting point of the expedition in the legend. And now we have a palace there which we didn't know about before, which Homer's contemporaries didn't know about, and which the later Greeks in 1000 BC didn't know about. For me, that is an argument that can put some history behind the legend of the Argonauts.
Admittedly, there are no inscriptions with the name Iolcus, but the description of the city from old sources and the legend of the Argonauts agree with the findings. Also, there are strongly fortified boulevards, which led directly from the palace down to the port. No one from the surrounding houses could see or access the entrance. This made it a perfect sluice to control the entry and exit of people and goods. The old port has long since silted up. However, in the Mycenaean period, the site was next to the sea. As the northernmost stronghold of the kingdom, Iolcus primarily supplied trading partners in the Aegean. The business relationships reached to Troy, the wealthy customs post before the Dardanelles. The countryside of Iolcus was famous for livestock and agricultural goods. Grain, olives, wine, and fruit were among the export successes of the fertile region. Only the king made decisions about cultivating and distributing the goods.
We have determined that the city's economy was mainly supported by the production of agricultural goods. However, it is also becoming clear that people participated in sea trade. Ship illustrations on jugs make it clear they were seafarers. Moreover, the findings from the settlement prove that they regularly imported goods from far away. This means that the inhabitants were in constant contact with the cities in the Aegean and even in the entire world that was known at the time.
A few years ago, archaeologists made a spectacular find in the domed tombs located outside of the palace site. The final resting places reflect the successful management of the ruler of Iolcus. The dead were buried with valuable objects. The excavators found fine jewelry in the earth. The precious metal often came from Egypt, but the kings were always on the lookout for other sources of supply.
Gold had a high prestige value in Mycenaean society. Gold has been found in the tombs of aristocrats, and also sometimes in palaces. There was gold jewelry. Weapons and ceremonial weapons were decorated with gold, and the aristocracy's requirement for gold was certainly large. Gold doesn't appear in great quantities in Greece, so it would have definitely had to have been imported, and that may have been a background to the legend of the Argonauts, because Colchis is known for its wealth of gold.
The Greek historian Strabon already suspected that the Mycenaean search for rich gold mines was the guiding force behind the Argonauts' journey. Therefore, they sent brave men on expeditions to the Black Sea. Colchis lay on distant shores. News of its mineral wealth stirred the appetite of the regents. Former Admiral Apostolos Curtis wants to prove with a replica that a huge ship like the Argo could cover long distances, even in difficult wind conditions and against strong currents. He has invested 5 years in the project.
Ships are portrayed on a lot of old ceramics, but the illustrations don't show our particular model, but different types of boats, bigger and smaller. So also cargo ships and warships. Our problem wasn't finding a picture of a boat. It was only hard to find the right template to follow.
Using the information from Apollonius and numerous drawings, the former admiral is gradually developing an exact representation of how the Argo of the Bronze Age must have looked. In the end, he will have a detailed blueprint, from the length of the ship, to the number of rowing places, to the equipment, and even the color. Experimental archaeologists fell the wood not far from Iolcus. Before working with it, they preserved the logs in salt water for weeks. Flexible pine for the hull, ash for the naval ram, and beech for the keel, materials that would be commonly used in shipbuilding in 1400 BC. The men get to work with simple tools. They base their work on the knowledge of the Mycenaean builders. Not a single metal nail is used in the construction of the ship. As at the time, a zip made of wooden dowels holds the planks together. In total, there are 2,000 pins in the hull of Argo II. On September 17, 2007, the proud oar-powered boat is finally launched. Following the route of the Argonauts is no longer in the way of the experiment.
We have 2 significant seafaring stories, the Odyssey and the Argonauts. One may wonder why the Greeks draw on such stories. There are various reasons for that, of course. On the one hand, the Greeks are a seafaring people who set out on far-reaching expeditions very early. On the other hand, seafaring stories are well suited to recounting a whole range of adventures, because you can connect one post to another and be taken to distant lands on which all kinds of exciting things can be projected.
Jason's crew was made up of a group of illustrious heroes, according to Apollonius. The leader's companions included Hercules, Orpheus, Castor, and Pollux. But who was actually on board instead of these mythical figures is a mystery. However, each man on the crew would have had to have shown special abilities to safely navigate the ship and to overcome the dangers at hand. Jason's best friend enjoyed a prominent position at sea. Erginos assumed the responsible position of helmsman. The young noble came from Miletus, a city in Asia Minor. From 800 BC, Miletus established itself as the most important trans-shipping port for long-distance trade with the Orient. Soon, the palace assumed dominance in the Aegean. The successive power of the Mycenaeans built ceremonial temples, theaters, and palaces. Ancient authors reported on the immeasurable wealth of the metropolis. For centuries, Miletus was also the center of art and science. Since 1989, the Bochum professor Volkmar von Grave had been researching the temple complex of the ruined site. Inside the research area, there is a 1-meter-deep ritual burial site. The so-called botros salvages the remains of once holy tools. The remains reveal the origin of the items to the researchers. They come from all over the world, proof that at the time, Miletus played a leading role in the international stage. An advantage which led to the establishment of colonies up to the Black Sea.
With respect to colonization, Botros teaches us something new. Before, there was a lot of doubt. We knew little about the 7th century. Now we have found this, with far more than 1,000 objects, and it creates a new picture.
Like pearls on a string, there was one settlement after another, 80 around the Black Sea alone. The center got slaves, fish, and grain, but primarily iron ore and gold from the markets that had opened up. Miletus pushes forward, expanding the superlative. The chosen men have to leave their wives behind. Far from home, they shall start another family. Farmers, craftsmen, bookkeepers, mercenaries, and academics receive money, provisions, and ships to go into the unknown. Many thousands of volunteers follow the regent's call in the hope of fat profits. The unprecedented transfer of mind and capital raises the economic boom to unimagined levels. Herodotus, the father of history, describes the other side of the coin. Because the rulers prefer goods from the colonies and spurn the domestic products. Miletus's foreign trade policy isn't without effects. It's leading to more unrest. The farmers in the motherland are suffering. They can't sell their produce to the people anymore. The tyrants give the insurgents a short trial. Whoever disrupts order, such as wildly proliferating ears of wheat, is expelled from society and forcibly sent to a new settlement. The legend of the Argonauts points out that strongholds had been built on the Black Sea long before Miletus.
I imagine there was previous knowledge which reaches back to the Mycenaean period. Other Mycenaean sea routes were then taken by the Greeks in the 8th or 7th century, sometimes with the same strongholds. It must have been a recollection.
Apollonius recounts in detail which ports the Argo visits en route. These ports of call are where the seafarers have wild adventures. The pioneers must negotiate 1,200 nautical miles from Iolcus through the North Aegean, the Dardanelles, and the Bosporus to the gold mines on the Black Sea. They only reach their destination after 2 years. An adverse wind forces the men to stay longer on land. They not only stash away provisions and water, but go on raids, lead small wars, and father children. In ancient times, common episodes for a hero's journey. The Argonauts pass the first obstacle, the Dardanelles, without incident. But a much bigger challenge faces them, the risky crossing of the Bosporus, a sea corridor which many seafarers had failed to cross. Even the king of Iolcus believed that Jason would die there. Apostolos Curtis' crew set sail. Men and women ranging from 20 to 72 with no particular prior knowledge want to cover the same distance as the Argonauts did in ages past, with only wind and muscle power.
The Argo was a ship with 50 rowing places. The size of the replica is based on the requirements of the human body. If we had built it smaller, 50 men couldn't have rowed efficiently. If we had built it bigger, they would have had to move excess weight. So we have built an optimum rowing machine for 50 people, 25 rowers on each side.
The crew were at the oars for up to 15 hours. In favorable weather, the Argo II covers from 30 to 50 nautical miles at a speed of 8 knots, barely 15 kilometers an hour, a speed which Jason's people could have also reached. The ideal time of year to travel through the Bosporus is between May and the end of July. However, the heroes must have arrived there sooner because they encountered a strong northwesterly wind, which condemned them to wait for 40 days. The myth speaks of 2 crashing boulders, powerful towering waves, and torrential churning waters. However, there is nautical experience behind the poetic imagery and precise knowledge of the natural circumstances in the sea corridor between Asia and Europe. The 31-kilometer water corridor still takes its toll today. More than 450 ships have had an accident in the last 50 years alone.
That's why the Bosporus is one of the most dangerous water corridors in the world, because it has a very strong current, just here in this area. Strong changes in course, as you can see here very well. On the other hand, a much frequented stretch of water with about 150 passages per day. Then there are all the ferry crossings, which bring millions of passengers from the Asian part to the European part. All that together, paired with poor visibility now and then, or a very strong wind, which is unpredictable, makes this corridor by far the most dangerous in the world.
Even in the age of modern technology, the bottleneck is a source of danger. 3,500 years ago, the chances for the Argo were 0, as the simulation suggests. It explains why trading routes didn't exist between the Aegean and the Black Sea for a long time.
For a wooden ship like the Argo, the narrowest space would be especially difficult, where there can be currents of up to 7 knots. This stretch is about 2 miles long. That means, by exceeding the speed by 1 knot, so if it travels at 8 knots, it would still take 2 hours to travel this stretch without a break. That is huge.
Nevertheless, the Mycenaean heroes accomplished the feat. It is said they were helped by a dove. Before the rocks smashed together again, the bird flew between them. The clever animal signaled to the crew of the Argo that the weather pattern had changed, and therefore so had the current. This was a relief for the Argonauts. The way was clear. Normally, the water flows from north to south through the bottleneck, supported by the prevailing wind direction over the Black Sea. It is only reversed during a small window of time in the early summer. Then, a rowboat like the Argo can also travel through the Bosporus with the current and the wind. Apollonius attributes the achievement to the protective goddess Athena. She gave Jason's ship a saving push. Realistically, the early explorers probably spent months at observation posts, studying the change in flow directions. At the right time, they seized the moment. The Argo II failed to make the journey through the legendary sea corridor. The authorities did not give the Greeks permission. The crew covered 600 nautical miles. The distance they traveled corresponds to the distance between Iolcus and the Bosporus. They managed this feat with untrained people, so it is technically possible. modern-day scientists doubt that a man named Jason actually conquered the Bosporus. They think that the Greek hero embodies adventurers and explorers from the Bronze Age, unknown men who undertook successful expeditions in far-off lands. With only the gods on their side, the celestial beings legitimize the journey of the adventurers, regardless of what the heroes are up to.
There is evidence to support that Jason definitely sailed to Colchis primarily for the gold. There are numerous documented places there where gold can be found. And just as it is today, gold was a distinctively valuable material. Another possible reason he sailed to Colchis was because there were reports that large quantities of copper and bronze had been produced there. And also, at that time, the first iron had been produced on the east coast of the Black Sea. Potentially, that was also an incentive for a transfer of technology.
Following its glorious victory over the elements, the Argo took its course to the country of Colchis. The team rode along the coast in stages. The companions wanted to get to the capital city on the river, Phasis. Jason knew that his life and those of his comrades once again hung in the balance. The mission to steal the Golden Fleece from the King's Grove held a high risk, for a fearful dragon guarded the holy ramskin. So the myth encoded the rich gold deposits in any region which the Greeks wanted to exploit. There, where the Argonauts once anchored, lies the modern port city of Poti. In ancient times, the place was a hub for ores, silk, and spices. Now, oil is primarily handled there. Georgian archaeologist Rezo Papuashvili has been looking for the remains of Phasis Palace for decades. He constantly travels upriver from the estuary. In the Bronze Age, people thought that the palace on the waterway was the last post before the end of the world. The archaeologist hasn't succeeded yet. There is not enough money for a large-scale campaign.
At this place where we're now standing, we carried out an excavation 10 years ago. We found Greek ceramics in one layer. The findings came from the 6th or 5th century BC, so it could be that the city Phasis was somewhere here. Several Greek and Roman authors still reference it. It would be of great significance to find the city to research the history of Colchis and the Greek colonization.
The excavated ceramic objects mainly served as transport containers for olives, grains, and wine. Earthenware was mass-produced to ship the important export items to the Mediterranean. According to the legend, Jason and his men reached their destination safely. Phasis appeared before them like a paradise, with gardens in bloom, lush fruits, and fountains from which the wine flowed in streams. The Greeks also traditionally cultivated wine. The grapes from Colchis stood out because of their excellent quality. Fertile soil and an optimal climate made the region a first-rate grape-growing area.
Georgia has an age-old winemaking tradition. It goes back to the Stone Age.
And we know
that the legend of Jason and the Argonauts talks about it. We have found amphorae outside of Georgia, which provide evidence of a long history of exporting.
Also wine export.
The morning after the arrival in Phasis, Jason goes before King Aeetes and his family. The ruler wondered at the stranger in the kingdom at the end of the world. When the Greek asked for the Golden Fleece, the monarch recognized the danger he was in, because if he lost the ram skin, his life would be forfeit, as an oracle had foreseen. The high-security wing of the National Museum in Tbilisi. Here, modern-day guards protect the largest haul of Georgian gold. Professor Hauptmann may examine the state treasure in all its glory. The metallurgist wants to determine whether the material comes from the old mines of Kolkis. Archaeologists found more than 6,500 valuables from rulers' tombs of different eras. Gold has forever been a symbol of the gods. With the kings of Kolkis, there were pieces of jewelry with rams on them, the holy animal of Zeus. The reason, proof of Greek influence in the Black Sea. It happened at the guest ritual in the palace. Medea, the beautiful daughter of the regent, gravitated to the brilliant hero Jason. The girl decided to stand on the side of the visitor from Iolcus. Her father promised the Golden Fleece to the intruder if he solved 2 difficult tasks. But secretly, the ruler planned to kill Jason. The Argonaut bravely overcame the superhuman tests, thanks to Medea's witchcraft. The love-struck woman laid her cards on the table. If the Greek took her to be his wife, she would help him to steal the valuable skin.
If one bases Greek expectations on the behavior of a young girl or a young woman, Medea is everything that a Greek father would not accept. Greek girls, as you know, never left the house alone. Medea even breaks away from her parents. There is one version of the story that provides us with the idea that young Medea doesn't actually care all that much about her parents or familial traditions. According to traditional Greek ideas and cultural norms, that is simply scandalous.
Professor Hauptmann is on the way to one of the biggest gravel pits in Georgia. There is still a gold rush atmosphere in the country. The gravel extraction from the rivers has a welcome side effect. Not only fine sand collects in the gullies under the large screw, small gold particles also get caught there. The metallurgists look for a suitable water point. The flow speed is crucial. The team wants to pan the gold from the excavation with a special device, a process that requires patience and a practiced eye. From the ratio of mud and precious metal, the experts can estimate how big the deposits in the vicinity are. The rivers no longer supply quantities like they did in the Bronze Age. In the best-case scenario, it takes a week to collect enough material for one ring.
We have been able to show in this gold panning experiment that the rivers in Georgia are leading the way in gold today. And that is a clear indication that they contained gold 3,000 or 4,000 years ago too, which at the time could be extracted with a fleece.
The treasure seekers lay the skin out behind large boulders or a waterfall because the behavior of the current changes in places. And so, the Golden Fleece was born. When the sand is washed out, the shiny grains would get caught in the thick hair of the animal skin. The legend of the Golden Fleece refers to the practice of panning for gold. 70% of the precious metal still came from rivers, including the jewelry from Iolcus, as analyses have shown. This explains why the theft of the unique trophy marks the high point of the drama in Kolkis. At night, Medea and Jason snuck into the holy place. The young woman must once again prove her magical powers. The unsleeping dragon guarded the forbidden place around the clock. With a sweet song, the king's daughter called the gods of sleep to lull the monster to sleep. When the monster's limbs sank to the ground, Medea blew a strong potion into its eyes. What the Greek poet praised as a heroic act is in truth an act of sacrilege. Jason takes Colchis' most valuable commodity, gold.
According to some Greek traditions, the Golden Fleece is a skin which was used in the gold extraction process. In some countries, the Golden Fleece is a general symbol of power and wealth. Whereas in Colchis, the term Golden Fleece exclusively meant immeasurable wealth of gold.
In 2004, in eastern Georgia, on the outskirts of the ancient Colchis, the metallurgists made a sensational discovery. What began with a few simple stone hammers led the team from Tbilisi and Bochum to the oldest gold mine in the world. Today, the tunnels of Sakdrizi are in good condition. When they were laid, the workers filled the cavities with earth. These measures prevented the mine from collapsing. When inspecting the individual shafts, the experts came across a large vein which reaches to a depth of about 27 meters. To penetrate to the level means clearing vast amounts of rubble out of the way. Professor Hauptmann takes new rock samples in the individual passages. An initial study by George and colleagues has shown that there is about 2.5 grams of gold in 1 ton. But they need comparative values to calculate the yield of the deposits thousands of years ago. For 5 years, the mining metallurgists have been digging channels from top to bottom. The method hasn't changed since the Bronze Age. People followed the course of the gold veins. That's why the site looks like a Swiss cheese. Openings wherever you look. The most difficult part of the campaign is finding the connection to the deepest section of the main vein. Several attempts have already ended nowhere. But this time, the researchers seem to be on the right path. They discover wood charcoal that is 5,000 years old. From then on, the slogan is, advance from 2 sides, despite the risk of collapse. A short time later, the men retrieve a so-called hammer stone. The find indicates the typical deformation. Ancient miners hammered the ore in the rock using this simple, handheld tool. Both teams are getting closer to each other. Then, at last, the helpers can release the cover. According to belief, it sealed the underworld, the place where the angry gods lived. The opening was made. The oldest gold vein in Sakdrizi is open. 30 meters deep, it leads to the belly of the earth. The honor of the ascent goes to the youngest of the troop.
Gold was extracted from this mine for 400 years from the late 4th millennium and the early 3rd millennium. With great style, one has to say. We have no evidence in this place about the classical Greek period, but we know the surrounding area. We have a large settlement, and we also have indications of metallurgy, so that it appears that these entire gold deposits, which are arranged like pearls on a string, have also been removed. It is actually only a question of time until a younger mine is found that dates back to this period.
More than 200 kilograms of gold was probably extracted in Sakdrizi. If the precious metal is processed first, it is hard to determine its origin. Only since the development of the geochemical fingerprint have metallurgists been able to attribute the material to a deposit, a milestone in mining research. Andreas Hauptmann has brought samples from the museum in Tbilisi to the Institute of Geosciences in Frankfurt. He hopes to reveal the secret of the Georgian burial objects with the new method. However, the fingerprint could be blurred. Goldsmiths often worked with material from different sources. This was certainly the case if it was a larger object or a piece of elaborate jewelry.
We had the chance to analyze several dozen gold artifacts from Georgia and pose the following question: where does the gold originally come from? Where is the deposit located from which this gold was melted? The question revolved around whether Sakdrizi could possibly have been one of the gold suppliers. After our investigation, that has been determined as highly likely.
According to the myth, during the night, Jason and Medea hurried to the companions on the Argo with the valuable treasure. Together, the seafarers escaped to their distant home. The brave pioneers are certain to receive fame and honor, and the prince can take his rightful place on the throne of Iolcus. The legend of the Argonauts is more than a legend. It is humanity's first travelogue, a report on the progress of shipbuilding, the sailing abilities of the early seafarers, and the hunt for natural resources in the Black Sea. The foray into sources of gold marked the start of Greece's expansion policy and triggered an economic boom which continued for centuries.